And we're back with Karen Restoule. And in this last section, I want to put the question to you that people read all the time about reconciliation. And in many cases, politicians use it, I think, unfairly and unjustly. And indeed, some Native leaders I've heard, Indigenous leaders say, you know, we're fighting for reconciliation, especially the professional ones in Ottawa who are highly paid, and they aren't getting anywhere on this. And I think many Canadians are just tired of it. Can we not just pull together and move forward? I know Indians who say, you know, let's just, you know, whether I'm an Indian or just a non-Indian, can we just move forward? How do we deal with this? Get rid of this problem.
So what I'm hearing, Stephen, is that you really wish that we could all just get along.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? What, are you saying?
In what world does that happen? Which movie are you watching? This isn't Hollywood. This isn't a Disney movie,
not
Stephen.
Every day, not every month. But generally, I mean, there's disagreement between Natives, between whites, amongst themselves. That's called debate. That's called discussion. But why is it a fundamental disagreement between two nations, if you will?
Yeah. So,
and why are we still not doing anything?
So I have a background in law. You know, I studied law.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes in studying Indigenous law is the Supreme Court stated in one of these conflict-driven cases, we are all here to stay. And so it's in all of our interest to try every day to work it out with one another.
So you and I, if we were in charge, we could solve it. We can work it out.
Yeah.
But we aren't.
Let's solve it right here, right now.
Let's. So what's going to happen? What's your prediction?
So reconciliation has two arms, if you will.
Yeah.
One arm really does belong in ensuring that the laws and policies that have been propped up by previous governments that have an over restriction on Indigenous peoples here in Canada ought to be, removed and ought to be replaced with more productive modern policies that really help position nations to build themselves out.
Should we just get rid of the Indian Act? Why?
Is exactly, you're too smart. That's exactly what needs to happen.
So get rid of the Indian Act, but then I'm sure there'd be some people say, well, does that mean that we go by the white person's law?
So opting out,
all these bureaucrats running Indians.
Absolutely. That's often a question that I get is said, okay, well, we all agree the Indian Act has to go. So what does that mean, Karen? And what it means, in my view, for those who've been paying attention to Indigenous policy, would know that 53 First Nations of the 600 plus in Canada have already opted out of the Indian Act. And so they have, in various forms, it's not all the same, but they have some sort of modern agreement with the federal government, with the Crown, where they are responsible for governing their own affairs. Excellent example, like Tsawwassen out in British Columbia. At the time, they were led by a woman that I have a ton of respect for, Kim Baird, who was, I think, one of the youngest chiefs of that community at the time, 15, 20 years ago, led her community through that modern agreement process. And guess how that turned out today. 10 years after passing the modern treaty, roughly $10 billion of capital, private capital invested in development within that nation, okay? So that's what getting out of the Indian Act looks like. Now, that said, we have another 50 or so who are in negotiations to do a similar agreement, but we still have 500 plus who are like my community under a historic treaty, and government is really hesitant to go sit down and look at those historic treaties, to look at what would that look like today if the nations were to govern themselves. Now, the other side of the equation here, when we talk about reconciliation, sure, removing the Indian Act, making sure federal laws and policies aren't, holding us back as a country. But nations ourselves, we have a lot of work to do, much like Chief Baird in Tsawwassen, who led her community through that governance process. All those other nations, we have to do the hard work of revitalizing our laws, our governance structures, and getting ourselves back on track.
I think you should be the chief, and then we can solve all these problems. Karen Restoule of the Oyster Group, Thank you very much for joining us. So it's a dicey problem, as you've heard, but as also Karen is a testament to, there are solutions to it. So thanks for joining us, and keep it up. We'll get this solved. No problem at all.
Always a pleasure.
Till next time.